Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Got a few really surprise announcements today. First of all, let me wish you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Mine turned out to be so much better than expected. That was the first kind of amazing surprise. Actually, it's basically a miracle. You may remember 6 months ago or so, probably a little longer than that, a lady I consider to be my best friend went missing in Ukraine. She's presumed killed in the war. She got in touch Thanksgiving Day. She is alive. She had taken her family and gone to a very remote rural area, sort of between the borders of two countries. And they they left, in the early spring when it was freezing cold. The house hadn't been lived in for 3 years. There was no electricity, no running water, anything like that. So they had a, pretty rough time and no internet and no way to contact me. And I'm so thrilled that she's alive. I mean, she's such a wonderful person. She's filled me in on what's happened. I mean, her family home completely bombed out and burned to the ground. They've had a really rough time, but thank God they are alive. And that was my Thanksgiving miracle. I mean, what more can I ask for? So that was great, obviously. But the other surprise announcement, which you'll say, is well, y'all know I tend to work on several projects at once. When I was ready to do the Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking, my cookbook, I just put everything else down and I focused on that. I wanted to get it out, so people would have it by November so they could use it for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner and all that. And, y'all, this book has been so well received. Cannot believe it. The reviews on not only Amazon, but on the Grow Network, on Permies.com, on various websites are so good, so very good. People are really excited about this book. I've gotten so many messages, people telling me how the book has really inspired them to get into home cooking. And I think that's great. People are saying now, basically now that they have my book and it tells them how to make things from scratch, they feel more comfortable planting a garden in the spring, maybe keeping a few chickens or goats in the backyard, shopping at a local farmer's market or buying from a local farmstead or farmer, maybe taking up hunting and fishing. They're, it's life changing for them, and it's great. I mean, people are excited to know that they don't have to go buy dead food from a grocery store. They don't have to get takeout all the time. And, that's a foreign concept to me, but that's how most people in America eat. Most people in America eat food that is making them sick. Most people in America don't have family meals together. Most people in America are not growing their own food or sourcing it from someone who does. As far as I'm concerned, that's led to the epidemic of health problems, the diabetes, the heart disease, the cancers, the autoimmune conditions. As far as I'm concerned, that's led to the breakup, in large part, of the nuclear family. because there aren't meals being cooked in the home and people sitting down and having family meals together. Uh, and really, from the the prepper standpoint of it, if things get messed up in the supply chain, I mean, it doesn't have to be like a grid down situation or something like have been dealing with in Ukraine, by the way. It could just be a supply chain issue. The trucks may not make it to the store. There could be a diesel shortage, which is what they've been talking about recently. And what are people going to do? What are people going to do who don't know how to cook their own food? So, one of the very nicest compliments, and I actually heard this from a couple of people. They said that my book, The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking for Preppers, Homesteaders, Permaculture people, and everybody else, uh, was the along with along with Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions, which is published by the Weston A. Price Foundation, the two essential cookbooks on their shelves written in the last couple of decades. I didn't make that up. I'm not the one saying that. Other people are saying that. I think this book, if enough people can read it, if enough people can get their hands on it, and that's an issue for a self-published author, is getting it out there to a larger audience. I have no way of getting it into libraries and universities and and such as that, or bookstores. You, as my listener, as a reader, you can request that. You can definitely request a library buy my book, a bookstore carry my book. What you can really do to help me would be to post reviews on different websites. If you bought the book and you liked it, put up an Amazon review or review it somewhere else. If you didn't like it, maybe keep it to yourself. Seriously, tell me privately if you have some constructive criticism. But no, I put a lot into that book, and I am really glad. It could be the beginnings of like a food revolution, like the Weston A. Price book was, like Sandra Katz's book was on fermentation, like The Joy of Cooking was back in, I guess, the 30s. Um, I hope so. I'd love for that book to bring people back to basics and back to good health and good eating. Because to me, I mean, I don't eat health food. I eat food that tastes good. Uh, I eat natural fats. I eat a lot of butter and lard and beef suet, and I eat a lot of meats, and I eat a lot of garden vegetables. And, I have my desserts. I enjoy my wine and beer, and I live a pretty strong, healthy life. I mean, people were really kind of amazed when they meet me and say we're the same age, and they start telling me about all their prescriptions and doctor's visits, and I'm like, yeah, I haven't been to the doctor in over 20 years. And they're surprised I'm their age, actually. People often think I'm at least 10 years younger than I am. And, I've had my health troubles. I've had sort of some hard times in life. But because of the foods I eat and the lifestyle I live in the wilderness and the medicinal herbs, we cannot minimize the medicinal herbs. I don't have need for all those prescriptions. I don't have need for doctors. I mean, like I always say, if I broke my leg or had a heart attack, yeah, I'd go to the doctor. But for colds and flus and blood pressure and cholesterol and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I know I take care of myself. No problem. You can do that too. And healthy eating is, really part of that. And to me, healthy eating is eating real food, the kind of diet my great grandparents ate that allowed them to live to be, in their late 90s and 100 years old. I mean, they were Southerners, lived on a farm, grew their own vegetables, raised hogs, just a good variety of natural foods. So, like I was saying, I did work hard on that, and I put a lot of projects to the side, which is not something I normally do. Normally, I will carve out, say, an hour a day to work on this, and then an hour a day to work on that, and that's how I get a lot done. I specifically slot the period of time I'm going to work in the garden, the period of time I'm going to walk the dog, the period of time I'm going to work on this book, the period of time I'm going to work on that book, and every other project in my life. It's how I stay productive, and it's actually the way I like it. I can't stand working a 9 to 5 job, but if I can set my own schedule and do things like that that I enjoy, then I'm actually very happy. So I do work harder than a lot of people that work for a paycheck because I'm doing what I like. But, like I said, when I got to the Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking, I set everything else down because I wanted that thing out so people would have it for the holidays. And let me just go ahead and give you a pitch. It will make a great Christmas present. anyone on your list. But you go to Amazon, buy the book in paperback if you want under the tree. If you got somebody who likes ebooks, you can get it from really any seller of ebooks or directly from me. So, but now let me get on to the second announcement. I was unaware how close I had gotten to finishing another book by the time I had begun work on the cookbook. I've talked a lot about the medicinal use of ferns on this show. I've written extensively about it. It's just one of my articles and such, and made mention in various places, but it really surprised me. There was no comprehensive guide to the herbal use of ferns and what are known as fern allies. All right. Ferns are those soft-looking plants that grow in the shade, and they have like feathery type leaves, and they don't have flowers. They reproduce by spores. Actually, been very surprised to find out how many people don't know what fern is, but it's a type of plant, and along with what are known as fern allies, which are predominantly um, club moss and horsetail, also known as scouring rush. For our uses, is as herbalists, there are a few others like the quillworts and such. They don't have to seem to have many medicinal or edible uses. These are the first vascular plants on Earth, millions and millions of years ago. The very first forms of life on land, we're not talking in the water now, that we still recognize and eat and know today as food and medicine were ferns and fungi, mushrooms and ferns. At, going back that far, you had uh, like horsetail. Horsetail almost grows in a stalk like a very large asparagus, if you want to think about it like that. You had forests of them. These things would be 100 feet tall. You had ferns that were just massive. You had forests of these plants. They're called vascular plants. That means they put down roots. They can pull up nutrients and water from the soil. That allows the top of them to reach toward the sun. That's the first plant life on Earth. That's what the dinosaurs ate. Without the ferns and the fern allies, there would have been no possibility for animal life on Earth. There's algae in the sea, and of course, various plankton and everything, and various sea animals could eat the algae, and then the fish could eat the other sea animals and all that. But on Earth, we had to have plants and mushrooms, plants and fungi, if you want to look at it that way. Throughout history, in every single um, tradition of herbal medicine that I've looked in around the world, people have made use of ferns and the fern allies for medicine and some for food. Some can be toxic, some are quite edible and very delicious. Some are a little in between. For centuries, thousands of years, the bracken fern was considered to be a delicacy in Europe. People ate the bracken fern like we would eat asparagus. They call them fiddleheads, one of the first spring vegetables. Now they say over time that could cause stomach cancer. Again, I'm going to put that caveat out there that I think the risks are a little overblown. But if you have a risk of cancer, if you have a family history of cancer, if you ever have any concern with cancer whatsoever, always heed those risks and warnings. I actually don't eat bracken fern. Well, every now and then I might grab a little. What we eat more in America is ostrich fern. Ostrich fern is so plentiful where I live. In fact, in my yard, I was able to count 17 varieties of ferns and more in the woods that I haven't even gotten around to identifying yet. I live, like I always say, I live in a mushroom paradise. I live in a fern paradise. There are ferns everywhere. Ferns have been used in ancient Greek herbal medicine, um, traditional Chinese medicine, Native American herbal medicine, the British of the Elizabethan era, the Polish, the Ukrainians, the Russians, you name it. Very much used in the Polynesian cultures. There are specific ferns that grow like in New Zealand and on specific islands. Ferns have been used in so many ways, but there was no book that comprehensively laid out here are all the ferns we know are either or well, specifically medicinal, but some edible, and here's how to use them. And so I started this massive amount of research. And that's why it kind of took me a long time off and on because I had to seek out certain books. I had to look up certain books, some things I had to translate. But what was also really fascinating about ferns was the folklore. These plants, I think, being such ancient parts of our world, seem to have a special significance for most peoples. There is the stories you find in cultures as far apart as England and China about a certain fern and its like mythical, magical properties will blow your mind. And it could be the same fern, and sometimes they're very similar things they believe about this fern. There are, these probably arise from very ancient legends that were passed down, you know, really more when we were one family of man. Originally there were just two people on Earth. We're all related if you go back far enough. One reason I have no racial prejudice. I mean, we're just a few steps away from being, second cousins, no matter who you're talking about. But these legends, these myths, the lore, just fanciful. I mean, I don't believe in fairies and all the woohoo stuff, but to read these stories that have been passed down for centuries about the supposed magical properties, like the English believe the spores of one fern gathered on a certain night can make you turn invisible. They believe that, and I'm serious. This was even written about in Shakespeare's time. They believed another fern would cause horses to throw shoes or could unlock locks. In my friend in Ukraine, actually, I'll tell you what a wonderful, helpful person she is. When I told her about the book I was working on, she sent me a story of a mythical fern that is said to grow in Ukraine and Poland that at a certain night, at a very specific time, a mystical flower bursts forth through it. And if you find it at the right time and you tuck it against your heart under your shirt, all the forces of evil will come to try to frighten you and scare you to death and take it from you. But if you can make it home with it, you'll have peace and prosperity and a happy family life. I mean, that's just one of many of these really. I mean, some of them could be really. I'll give you an example, probably the most far out one. And this is really one that was the most widespread. It's called the Scythian lamb, and that's Lamb, like a sheep, a baby sheep. this this plant, this is actually a fern. The Scythian lamb, also called the vegetable lamb, is known officially as Cabodium barometz. Now, this is really wild. Okay, before, let's say, the Middle Ages, people didn't travel a whole lot. And when travel became a little bit easier and England began branching out, and this is really a little before the Crusades, I guess you would say, they were starting to get into trading and the trade routes and interacting with different cultures. I don't know if they began to learn those cultures' myths or if maybe sailors just liked making up really colorful stories. But at least by 1360, there was Sir John Mandeville, who was a traveler and a soldier, and he was very respected. And he wrote a memoir about a magical fern that lived in the land of the Tartars. And from this fern, flowers would form that were almost like cotton balls. And as those flowers reached the ground, they became living lambs that would be connected like as by an umbilical cord to the fern and would eat the grass around the fern at night. And if that umbilical cord was cut, they would die. People were fascinated by this idea. And honestly, they did not think he was a crackpot. In fact, his works were actually used by Christopher Columbus as a reference for his travels. The legend may have its roots in China. Ancient Chinese folklore actually has a very similar legend. So perhaps it made it from China to the Tartars, from the Tartars to the Middle East, and from to there to the British, and it became very popular, written about in both England and France. Probably certainly the most educated, and probably the very best herbalist of his era in England was John Parkinson. John Parkinson was the king's herbalist. Okay, this was a serious guy, and he was actually very educated in the best universities, spoke fluent Latin, and was quite a botanist as well as being a physician and herbalist. He wrote in his book Theatrum Botanicum, this strange living plant, as it is reported by diverse and good authors, is called by the natives bomarets, and I can't pronounce a lot of the other words. The others, either Planta ruthenica, Anglophilis, he gives lots of names for it, and some as plant animal. It groweth among the Tartars and about Samarcanda, and parts thereabout, rising from a seed somewhat bigger and rounder than a melon seed, with a stalk about 5 palms high, without any leaf thereupon. But upon bearing a certain fruit on the top, in form resembleth a small lamb, whose coat or rind is woody like unto a lamb's skin, the pulp or meat underneath, which is like the flesh of a crevalle or lobster, having, as it is said, blood also in it. It hath the form of a head hanging down and feeding on the grass round about, until it hath consumed it, and then dieth, or else it will perish if the grass round about it be cut away as it hath 4 legs also hanging down. The wolves much affect to feed on them. So that's pretty far out, you gotta admit. But this legend persisted. It was written about in poems. Let's see, Guillaume de Salute de Bartas. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one. He wrote a poem in 1587 about this. It continued on. Dr. Erasmus Darwin in the Botanic Garden in 1781 was writing poems about this mythical lamb. Um, Dr. Delacroix, Florum, he wrote a poem about this mythical lamb, Fern, in 1791. Now, think about it. In 1791, we had the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and a fairly modern society. So you can see how this myth hung on for hundreds of years and just seemed to fascinate people to no end. Now, from a botanical perspective, one, ferns don't reproduce by seeds. Two, ferns can't make sheep. But it's wild how people thought, even educated, sophisticated people would believe that ferns had mythical properties. They were the realm of, fairies and sprites and woodland spirits, and much used in witchcraft and such. So I sprinkle these throughout the book. I mean, they're fascinating, they're fun to read. They're Some of them are just plain weird. I mean, like that one. You should read the poem. So I'm not gonna try to read poetry to you right now. We haven't got that much time. But that's not, the thrust of the book. That's not the point of the book. The point of the book is medicinal uses for ferns. So I'll give you just a couple of examples here. Like the Venus maidenhair fern. This one is one that grows in my yard. The earliest, let me see, I'll get you a Latin name real quick. Adianum capillaris veneris, Venus or southern maidenhair fern. Earliest reference to this I could find was in ancient Jewish folklore. It says Talmudic literature, however you say it, uh, mentions several plants as having, mentioned 70 plants as having medicinal properties. Including these are garlic, beet, hyssop, cumin, fennel among the vegetables, etc. The following are some of the medicinal plants enumerated in the Talmud for liver ailments. And the first one listed, maidenhair fern, Adiatum capillaris veneris. Coming on down, we get to like Dioscorides, ancient Greek physician, the best of the herbalists. He said, a decoction of the herb taken as a drink is able to help asthma, difficulty in breathing, jaundice, the spleen, and frequent painful urination. Taken as a drink with wine, it breaks stones, both urinary and kidney, stops discharges of the intestines, and helps those bitten by venomous creatures and excessive discharges of the stomach. It draws out the menstrual flow and afterbirth. It stops the spitting up of blood. It is smeared on raw for venomous bites, thickens the loss of hair, including alopecia, that's in parentheses, and disperses tumors, goiters. With lye, it wipes off dandruff and scaly eruptions of the scalp. Inhaled, it was believed to prevent the falling of the hair, going bald, essentially. A decoction of it rubbed on with lye and wine does the same. Sticking with the Greeks for a minute, Pliny the Elder wrote about it in 77 AD, as saying it was of singular efficacy in expelling and breaking the calculi of the bladder. That's bladder stones, the dark kind in particular. And he believed it had that power because it grew on stones. And he believed that the fern's roots could break up a stone, and the fern in the body could break up stones, obviously. He said wearing a wreath of this fern about the head alleviates headache. Also good for the bites of various venomous creatures. Also recommended for alopecia and for scrofulous sores, scurf on the face, and running ulcers of the hand. Decoction also good for asthma, affections of the liver and spleen, enlarged secretions of the gall and dropsy. In combination with wormwood, they form a liniment for strangury and affectations of the kidneys. They also have the effect of bringing away the afterbirth and acts as a minagogue. Taken with vinegar or the juice of brambleberries, they arrest a hemorrhage. And it was even used in ancient Greece, combined with saltpeter and made into a liniment to prevent stretch marks. Said the wrinkles from forming on the abdomens of females, essentially. Okay. It was well used in England. Gerard wrote that it was good for those that are short-winded, for coughs and phlegms, good for a wash of the head, again for dandruff, psoriasis and such. Um, Continued to be used well into the 1930s in England. Maud Grieve said, it has been used from ancient times medicinally, being mentioned by Dioscorides, chief remedy in pectoral complaints, and that means the chest. We're talking long elements. A pleasant syrup made in France from it is called syrup de capillaire, which is given as a favorite medicine for pulmonary catarrhs. That's congestion. She talks a little bit about that. She actually quotes Culpeper, saying this and other maidenhairs is a good remedy for coughs, asthma, pleurisy, etc. On account of it being a gentle diuretic, it is also used in jaundice, gravel, and other impurities of the kidneys. All maidenhairs should be used green and in conjunction with other ingredients because their virtues are weak. Turn to the Irish tradition, we find John Kehoe in 1735 saying it helps cure asthma, coughs, and shortness of breath. It's good against jaundice, diarrhea, spitting of blood, and the bites of mad dogs. It also provokes urination and menstruation and breaks up the stone of the bladder, spleen, and kidneys. Really, you can see this has really ancient use, going from the Talmud through ancient Greece up to Miss Grieve in the 1930s. Currently, plants for the future. Listed as an ingredient in that French cough syrup, capillaire, but it says it is little used in modern herbalism. The fresh and or dried leafy fronds are anti-dandruff, anti-tussive, that means it helps stop a cough, astringent, demulsive, depurative, emetic, weakly emmenagogue, that means brings on menses, emollient, that means softening for the skin, weakly expectorant, febrifuge, that means helps with fevers, galactoglogue, which means it increases lactation, laxative, pectoral, refrigerant, which means cooling to the body, and useful in bronchitis. I think I explained everything that was weird in that. Also, stimulant, and sudorific and tonic. Tea of the syrup is used in treatments of coughs, throat afflictions, and bronchitis. It can also be used as a detoxicant in alcoholism and to expel worms from the body. Externally, it's used as a poultice on snake bites, bee stings, etc. In Nepal, a paste is made from the fronds and applied to the forehead to relieve headaches and to the chest to relieve chest pains. The plant is best used fresh, though it can also be harvested in the summer and dried for later use. And they go on to say, because you see, many herbalists think that ferns are all dangerous. Well, not all ferns are dangerous. Specifically of this one, Plants for Future says, although we have found no reports of toxicity for this species, a number of ferns contain carcinogens, so some caution is advised. Many ferns also contain thiaminase, an enzyme that robs the body of its B vitamin complex. In small quantities, this enzyme will do no harm to people eating an adequate, if they eat a diet that's adequate in vitamin C. Though in large quantities, it can cause health problems. The enzyme is destroyed by heat or by drying. This enzyme is destroyed by heat or thorough drying. So cooking or drying the plant removes the thiaminase and probably makes it very safe. And that's not all uses of this one fern. Remember, we're still just on Venus maidenhair fern. Amy Stewart wrote a really great book called The Drunken Botanist, and she tells us a little bit more about how that syrup, the capillaire, was used. In her recipe, she uses 2 cups of water, 1 ounce of orange flower water, and 1.5 cups of sugar combined with several stems of fresh maidenhair fern. Brings the water to the boil, pours it over the fern, lets stand for 30 minutes, strains, and adds other ingredients. She mixes that into a popular cocktail from 1862, which combined that syrup with green tea, lemon juice, rum, brandy, arak, which is a liqueur made from the sap of palm, Curaçao, a bottle of champagne, and a slice of pineapple. So in 1862, our ancestors were having a big old time with that fern. But just to clear up that point about toxicity and modern use, we'll turn to the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine. They say officially the drug is expectorant, beneficial in bringing up phlegm and emulsion. Unproven uses. In the Middle Ages, the drug was used for various illnesses of the respiratory tract in the form of a so-called pectoral teas and as a syrup for severe coughs. Because of its similarity to hair, the drug was used to treat lack of hair growth and to promote dark hair color. It is still used as an infusion in Spain, Belgium, and the Canary Islands to treat bronchitis, coughs, whooping coughs, and also for painful and excessive menstruation. And under precautions and adverse reactions, it says no health hazards or side effects are known in conjunction with the proper administration of designated therapeutic dosages. So that's a lot about one fern, isn't it? Let me tell you, that's just one fern. I have information here about the Venus maidenhair fern, which we just mentioned, the northern or true maidenhair fern, Adianum venestum. Not all of these have a common name, so I'm just going to run through them very quickly. Anthrameris wallachania, Asplenium adiantum nigrum, that's black maidenhair fern, Asplenium bulbiferum, Asplenium rhizophyllum or walking fern, Asplenium rudimeraria, that's rue fern or rue spleenwort, Asplenium trichomanes, that's English spleenwort, Aetherium felix femina, female fern, also Dryoptis felix maps, which is male fern. And those two have a ton of uses. They're two of the most popular ones, especially used in England and Greece and such. Aetherium melanopsis, several other Aetheriums, Niponicum, Rubicase, Yokinse, Blechnum spicant, Blechnum linaria, which is moonwort, Botricium virginianum, there's just rattlesnake fern. That was one that was much used by the Cherokee, and I've got some really great Native American information on a lot of these ferns. Especially when we get to horsetail, you'll love to hear what the Muskogee Indians do with horsetail. Cataract officinale, that's common spleenwort. That's another very widely used one in Europe. Cabodium barmarets, that's the vegetable lamb we talked about. Coniagrama japonica, Scythia delbade, that's tree fern. Holly fern, Cridomonium fortunei, brittle bladder fern, hay-scented fern, which was actually one of Henry David Thoreau's favorite ferns, and scents, he used it sort of as an incense. Dryopteris barbigera, buckra fern or shield fern, crownwood fern, crested word fern, Dropteris dilatia, Dropteris. It goes on and on. I got a lot of ferns here. Some of the more common ones we might find in America would be licorice fern, common polypody fern, break or bracken fern, Christmas fern, um, adder's tongue. Adder's tongue was one of St. Hildegard von Bingen's favorite ferns. She used it a lot for asthma and liver issues. We'll get to her in a moment. I want to give you a nice quote from her before we wrap it up. Let's see, cinnamon fern, ostrich fern, interrupted fern. I like that one because you always wonder what was it doing when it was interrupted. But it actually has to do with the way it grows. And then tons of information on equisetum, the horsetails, club moss, really fascinating plants. And I also included sweet fern. Now, sweet fern is Comptonia peregrina. It is not a true fern. Sweet fern was a very popular tea plant in early America, is much used by Native Americans. It is a Native American herb. Now, you may remember my interview with Amy Anthony about 3 weeks ago. She is fascinated by this fern, I mean, by this plant. She has found all kinds of great uses for it. And I just wanted to include it because it is a really cool plant. And, supply chain disruptions, we may have trouble getting coffee and tea and if things keep going the way they're going. And so we may have to go back to some of our native tea plants, whether it's the Yopon holly, the sweet fern, New Jersey tea. These are really good. And the sweet fern is one that is much used by the Muskogee. And Tismal Crow said that it was really good, especially for fevers. Also good as a hair rinse and particularly good for psoriasis, eczema, itching scalps, babies with cradle cap. Much used to treat poison ivy and poison oak, which is always a good thing to have on hand. Good for dysentery, diarrhea, and internal cramping, boils, all kinds of really good uses. So that's a good one to learn to identify. You can probably find it in the wild. It was actually listed in the U.S. dispensatory. Said it was a really good treatment for diarrhea. So, 100 years ago, a doctor may have prescribed you sweet fern tea. It's actually one of the first herbs written of in early America. It appears in the Towards an American Materia Medica, which was written when America was still a colony. It's a great plant. I could not leave it out. But there are other interesting uses really for ferns in general. I've mentioned before how Father Nape and Father Kunzel and different people in German folk medicine specifically talk about how you can use ferns for muscle pains, nerve pains, foot cramps, sore and tired muscles. Any ferns, these are used interchangeably. People will put them in their shoes for a long hike. um, Father Kunzel, I think it was Kunzel, could have been Nate, but I think it was Kunzel, recommended taking dried ferns and putting them in your bed, your feet and calves if you get foot cramps or you have nerve pain. They have a quality we cannot explain, and that may be another reason why ferns have such, I guess you would say, mystical lore associated with them. I think probably no one held ferns in higher regard than St. Hildegard von Bingen. St. Hildegard von Bingen, probably the greatest herbalist the world has ever known. She is actually a doctor of the Catholic Church. It's like pretty much the highest title you can get. I mean, she was legit. I mean, they were so impressed by her writings on specifically theology and such that she's one of the main Christian authors that one would read if one was going to sample Christian writing over the last 2,000 years. She wrote around 1100 AD. What makes her work so special is that she was essentially just dictating what she was being told in visions where she was speaking with Jesus and with angels. So while one may look at what I'm about to read as being a little odd and very strange to our modern ears, we have to remember the source. This is what she said about ferns. Now brace yourself. This is going to be the wildest thing you've heard all day. She said, if it, the fern, holds within itself great power, namely such a power that the devil flees from it, And it even has certain energy, which is like the power of the sun. As the sun lights up dark places, so the fern chases away apparitions, and evil spirits disdain it. In the place where it goes, the devil rarely practices his deceptions. The fern avoids and shrinks back from any home or place where the devil resides. Hail also rarely falls in a field where a fern is growing. Magic and incantations of demons, as well as diabolic words and other phantasms, avoid a person who carries a fern with him. If any image is prepared for carrying out injury or death, it is not able to harm one who has a fern with him. Now she's talking about, witchcraft of the time. And we still see this today in voodoo dolls, and whether you choose to believe it or not, okay, you don't have to. And in St. Hildegard's time in the Middle Ages, religious people, great saints, were very aware of the active role of demons in our everyday life, trying to hurt people, trying to tempt people, and those who trafficked with demons, which at the time, would have certainly been called witches, who were actively trying to harm people through supernatural powers. So you have to understand the world of 1100 to really understand where she's coming from here. But I definitely would not dismiss the words of a doctor of the church. This is the lady who composed most of the religious music in the Middle Ages. Scholars, great theologians, are still trying to understand many of the things she wrote about man, nature, and the universe, and theology. She goes on to say, a person has both good and evil knowledge. Ferns have been placed for knowledge, and in it is an honest nature. Goodness and holiness are signified. All evil and magic things flee and avoid it. In whatever house it is in, poisons and phantasms are not able to complete their work. When a woman gives birth to a child, fern is placed around her, even around the infant in his cradle. The devil besieges the infant less, since when he first looks at the infant's face, he hated him intensely. Fern is also effective in the following medicine. For one who is vergiftigate. Now, vergift is an old German term that can mean anything from bad arthritis to paralysis from a stroke. It's a wide-ranging term by people who are affected by pain and immobility. She said, "For one who is for gitch to get should take fern when it is green and cook it in water. He should frequently bathe in that water, and the gitch will cease. In the summer, when it is green, put the leaves over your eyes while you sleep. It will purify your eyes and take away their fogginess. One who is deaf so that he does not hear should tie fern spores." She called them seed at the time. Now we know them as spores. "In a little cloth and place it often in the ear. He will again receive his hearing. And one who is forgets to get in his tongue, that means the tongue is paralyzed, so that he cannot speak, should place fern seed or spores on his tongue, and the gitch in his tongue will cease, and he will again speak. Indeed, if a person who is forgetful and ignorant holds up fern seed in his hand, his memory will return, and he will receive understanding. Thus, he who is incomprehensible will become intelligible." That's really uh, pretty powerful statements. You know, I cannot explain everything she said. As a simple human being, I don't understand quite a bit of what she wrote. But her tradition of German folk medicine, which is very much based in both her writings and in the Benedictine herbal medicine that came from Rome, which originates in ancient Greece, etc., definitely made use of ferns far more than modern herbalists. By say late 1800s, 1900s or so, we can look to the great German folk medicine writers like Father Nape and Brother Aloysius and Father Johann Kunzel. And maybe they give it to us in a way we can understand it a little more. Father Kunzel said, "What is the best bed for people suffering from cramps, aching limbs, rheumatism, rheumatic toothache, rheumatic headache? A sack filled with dry ferns. Ferns draw these things away and give relief to those who suffer. In addition, fleas and bed bugs will not infest such a bed." Okay, that's a kind of a straight way, an easy way of understanding what Saint Hildegard would have said for Vergiftigate, and seen in a more mystical or spiritual sense. Moreover, Father Kunzel said, even the smallest varieties of ferns used internally, but only in small doses, will drive away worms. We see ferns used against intestinal worms on every continent on Earth, essentially, except I guess Antarctica. I don't know. But Father Kunzel goes on to describe multiple ferns and their uses, and so does Brother Aloysius, and so do all these authors. And like I said, it's a fascinating book. It really is, and it was fun to write. This one, I think it's just going to be essential on any herbalist shelf because, like I said, there is no other book like this, and really just for people who love plants. I mean, ferns are pretty. I love ferns. I mean, there's one of my favorite things is just walking in the woods and sit down in just a grove of ferns by a creek and just watch the sunlight kind of filter down and just have a peaceful moment. Ferns are just wonderful. So, y'all, that's about it for this week. Those were my big announcements. My friend's alive, and I've got a new book that came out a lot sooner than expected. So I hope you enjoyed this one. And I hope you will be able to buy some of my books as Christmas gifts for yourself and for your family and your loved ones. And let's keep this knowledge alive. Let's keep it going. Let's keep spreading it and propagating it so that such things are not forgotten. I think it would be very easy for me to say in this book on ferns, I go from the mundane to the sublime when we're talking about using one fern for intestinal worms and another fern to drive away the devil. It's like I said, it is a really fascinating book to read, and I think y'all are going to really enjoy it. I really do. Y'all have a good one, and I'll talk to you next week. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.